1,000,000 voices.
Hi, I'm Katia Dopos, and this is 1 Million Voices, where inspirational speakers share their stories and champion organizations that are making a difference in the world. Hello, welcome to a new episode of 1 Million Voices. It's a real pleasure to introduce our special guest today. She's a trailblazer and an inspirational entrepreneur who has been empowering women around the world and has been making a big difference to the fashion industry. Fashion designer and award-winning entrepreneur Ade Hassan is the founder of Nubian Skin, a pioneering company that offers skin tone lingerie and hosiery for women of color. The brand's high-quality products and inclusive ethos have attracted illustrious fans like Beyonce, Kerry and Lizzo. In recognition for her services to fashion, Ade has received prestigious awards including an MBE at Buckingham Palace in 2017. Hi Ade, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm so happy because I have been following your story for a long time now, and I'm a big fan of Nubian Skin and of course of your story as an entrepreneur. So thank you so much for making the time. It's so great to have you here with us today at 1 Million Voices.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. So let's talk about your personal story. You have a fascinating story, and it will be interesting to talk about the time when you were growing up. You often mention your parents as big influences on your life. And also you have lived in several different countries, and that's also very interesting. So let's talk about your personal journey.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Ade. Obviously, my family is Nigerian. So both my parents are from Nigeria. They live in Nigeria, but growing up, all of us were born in the UK. So I was born in the UK. My parents were training at the time. And we've lived in a lot of different countries. So we were born in the UK, then moved to Saudi Arabia, then moved to Nigeria, and then back to the UK, and then all over the place. And so I think that is probably one of the reasons why my parents and my family are so important to me. Because when you are moving and when there is so much change, you need stability somehow. And my parents really, throughout all of that, just fostered a really loving home. And so that is, and they were the constant, right? So they were the constant, my siblings were the constant. And so, yeah, for me, my family just plays such a huge part in my entire story because of the basis of, I think, just love, but also the fact that they were my constant throughout a lot of moving when I was younger. But despite moving, I consider myself to have had the most amazing childhood, and growing up in all those places meant that I was exposed to so many different cultures and people, and that's also just had a lasting impact on me.
Still talking about your parents, who, by the way, seem like amazing people. I want to meet them. They are fantastic. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about how they inspired you in your journey, not only in your personal journey, but also in your journey as an entrepreneur.
I mean, I think a lot of times people put their parents on a pedestal, and I definitely have. I'm very aware that they are human beings who are imperfect, but as far as being parents, they were the perfect parents for me. And my mum, especially, even from a young age, I was just always obsessed with her. Whether she'd be doing exercise videos and I'd like come and dance next to her, when I was about 4 years old, trying to do what she was doing. And I think for me, she was my first standard of what a woman should be. She was my first standard of what beauty was. She was my first standard of, unconditional love. And so I just was obsessed with her. I just liked spending time with her. And then obviously as I grew older, I saw how impressive she was. One, in the way that she was so comfortable in herself, no matter what situation she was in, but also just the sacrifices she made, how intelligent she was, how when she started her business, because when we came back from Nigeria, initially she studied to be a nurse, and then she did a master's in public health. And then she was a housewife when we were in Saudi Arabia, and then we moved to Nigeria, and she decided she wanted to start her own business. And she started her first business, which was a medical recruitment company. She didn't have experience in it, but she just made such a success of it. And for me at that time, I was sort of I was about between 5 and 9, seeing her sort of get dressed up, this is like the early 90s, like late 80s power suits, just like seeing her.
You're so the best.
Dressed as like a businesswoman. I mean, it was incredible. It was just incredible. And so that just really stuck with me, having this, because I'd seen the complete spectrum, right? I'd been with her when she was literally a stay-at-home mum. And then I saw her just like bossing it as this this professional who was building a business, and she was behind this desk and she had all this amazing stationery, and I was like, wow, this is the pinnacle, of what it could be to be a woman in business. And so I'd seen all of it, and I know a lot of times mothers feel guilt when they go to work, but for me, because we just had such a solid foundation of love, she was busy, but then when she was with me, that time was so precious. And so, she was like my dream. She was just such an inspiration to me. I could talk this whole thing about my mum, so I won't.
The whole interview.
She is amazing, and she's definitely a very big inspiration.
Any other role models as well? On the Nubian Skin website, you mentioned Eunice W. Johnson and supermodel Iman, who's absolutely gorgeous. I love her as well. So tell us about these fantastic trailblazers and their influence, their inspiration, how they inspired you when you were building your business.
Yeah, so my father is he's like an amazing visionary, and that's a whole nother topic I could get into. But on my website, I do mention Eunice Johnson, I mention Iman, because when I was starting Nubian Skin, there were no other companies that were doing what we were doing. And it resonated with me, those women's stories, because Eunice Johnson in the 70s created Fashion Fair, Fashion Fair Cosmetics, which was a brand of makeup for women of color. So, if you know anything about her story, she was married to the founder of Ebony magazine, and she was, a very successful woman at the time. She created these fashion fairs where Black women, and she would invite, sort of the couture and all the high-end labels from Paris to come to these shows, because there was so much, there were Black women who were spending money on fashion, but they just weren't being catered to. And so she was like, you know what? I'm gonna create this. And so then she created the cosmetics as well, because she realized that there were just, again, Black women spend a lot of money on makeup and hair, and people weren't catering to them. And so she created this brand so that, Black women had the same opportunities as white women and other women to completely play with their makeup, express themselves with their makeup. And I loved that. And Iman did the same thing with her cosmetics, obviously being a model and having been through the struggle of not being able to find makeup that fit her skin tone. She also created a line. And so I wasn't doing makeup, but I was doing skin tones for underwear. And seeing those women and how they had created brands was incredibly inspirational, because they decided not to settle for what the market was giving them. They decided to create something of their own to serve the demographic that they belonged to.
It's amazing stories, and it's fascinating to understand all these elements that were informing you as a person, as a businesswoman as well. And then, of course, you started your incredible company, Nubian Skin, in 2014. Mm-hmm. But let's go back to right the beginning, 2011, that light bulb moment you had, which is incredible, because when I heard your story, I was like, I couldn't believe that, those products were not being made available before. But let's talk about this. When you realize that I must do something about it, and tell us about this creation process, and when you had the idea, that's it.
Yeah, of course. So I still, if I close my eyes, I can literally still remember the desk I was sitting at. But I was doing management consulting at the time, and I wasn't loving it. And I'd been thinking about wanting to start a business, and I'd been trying so many different things. I had a little notebook where I wrote all the different ideas that I had, but nothing was really speaking to me. And I remember sitting at a desk, and it literally was one of those things where out of nowhere I was like, hang on a minute. I can't ever find a nude bra. Like I can't find it. And I literally, I like searched online. I was like, no, somebody's got to be doing this. And I'm like searching online. And I'm like, nobody's doing this. Like nobody is actively doing this. And so I just remember I was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Like this is it, this is it, this is it. And it was almost like, like shaking, like I can't believe it. Like I can't believe it. I found it. When I messaged a friend being like, I figured out what I want to do when I grow up. And that was really the turning point, because it was like, oh my goodness, I found a mission. I found my mission. Like this is it. And that was the beginning. That was 2011. And obviously a lot of things had to happen before I actively started working on Nubian Skin, including changing jobs so I could make more money. But that was that moment where I realized that actually this thing that I always looked for, nobody was doing, and I could be the one to do it, was, that was a game changer.
An interesting thing as well to talk about is that we're going to talk about your campaigns, which are gorgeous, really, really beautiful. But the first one, there's a very interesting story behind that. When you did the first photo shoot, tell us about that.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So, a lot of times I focus, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like this. You're like, you have a goal in mind. And you're like, I just have to get to the goal. I just have to get to the goal. You don't even think about what happens after, but you're just focused on that. And that was how I felt with the first photo shoot. I was just so excited because this is going to be my first expression of the brand to the world. And I took a lot of time thinking about, the models I wanted, the aesthetic I wanted, the setup. And so it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And then I had this one image, which I remember when I saw all the shots from the shoot, I was like, this is the image, like this, I love this image. It was the four women, and they were in the different styles, and they just all looked so happy and comfortable and beautiful. And I put that picture up on Nubian Skin's Instagram. At the time, we didn't even have the website. It wasn't live. We didn't have product yet. So we just had like an email capture. And I put that on Instagram. We had 50 followers on Instagram. And I remember we went on holiday to Croatia, and my phone kept buzzing, and I looked at it and I was like, oh my goodness, I've got 100 followers. Like, this is amazing. And if you scroll to like the very beginning of if you can be bothered to scroll to the very beginning of like the Nubian Skin Instagram page, I think you'll see something be like, oh my goodness, 100. Which obviously now, like, that's nothing. But and then we hit
it meant something.
I think by the end of the week, and my phone, I had to turn off my notifications because I was like, this is weird. Like, this is giving me the anxiety. Like, we don't even have product yet. So then we hit 1,000. And then in 4 weeks, I mean, we had 20,000 followers. We'd exploded on Twitter. We'd exploded on Tumblr at the time. We exploded on Instagram. And I started getting emails about, like, we want to do a story on you. We want, like, can we have image rights? And I was just like, I don't know what's happening right now, because Nubian Skin right now is just me. And so it was really, it was insane. But it was testament to the fact that that image resonated with so many people. They'd just never seen anything like it before. It's really interesting now, looking at the evolution, because it's been, almost 8 years, 7.5 years. It's been very, very interesting to see the impact that has had on marketing in general, and seeing, what people use as marketing, or when they show diversity, because at the time it was so phenomenal because people just didn't see it.
You were speaking to a lot of people, and you didn't, of course, I think sometimes we do things without planning too much, which is, I think, part of the entrepreneurship process, isn't it? Because if we think too much, sometimes we don't do anything.
Exactly.
But you released that picture, and it just spoke more than 1,000 words, and everybody saw it and was, wow, I want to be part of it. And that's really interesting. So you received this, a lot of attention, people asking you about the brand, and what did you do next?
I mean, then we just had to wait. We had to wait till we got product. And so, we obviously had people's emails. And then when we finally launched, we could email all those people saying, this is what's happened. But in the meantime, one of the things that was really exciting for me was starting to build a community. So all of a sudden, people knew who we were and we had all these followers and we were drip feeding images from the campaign, like things of information about the brand. And that was it was a very beautiful time, I think, in social media because it wasn't monetized yet. I don't even think Facebook owned Instagram at that point. So it was really a place about community and sharing and connecting. And so, people would, I remember when we released some images of the tights, we'd get like women in France being like, oh, and I speak a little bit of French, but there's some words which I just didn't know. And so we'd have people from France asking questions. And I was like, oh, I don't know the word for tights in French, but like it will be blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, oh, the word for tights is collant and da, 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 and so it was a really, it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful time of building community and meeting people who I didn't know, who just were passionate about a brand, which didn't even really exist yet. But they were telling other people, or it was lovely. And there was a lot of, especially at the beginning, a lot of community building, which actually now that I talk about it, I'm like, we really need to get back to that because you can get so caught up in running a business. But yeah, the community building was phenomenal.
It must have given you the energy that you needed at that time, right? And without you planning on having it.
Absolutely.
One story that is fascinating, before I talk about the ethos and the motto of the brand, which is fantastic, you always tell a story that is really, really, I think, adorable, fantastic, about your friend who sent you a card, and that also was a motivation, because we're talking about, people connecting with you. Tell us about that little moment as well. It's a little bit before that, so.
Yeah, of course. So when I was, it was summer 2020, summer 2012, because that was the summer of the Olympics. I'd spent the summer in New York, and I hadn't told very many people about Nubian Skin. I was just a little bit nervous. It was like my baby, and I was nervous about it, and I didn't tell very many people, but I did share it with a friend who I spent, when I was in New York, I spent summer with her, and we just like had a really lovely like sort of Sex in the City summer. But I told her about the idea, and then I came back and got engrossed in work, and then a year later, or just under a year later, she'd sent me a birthday card which arrived late. It arrived in May. My birthday's in April, and across the front it said, "It's time to start living the life you've always imagined." And then on the inside she'd written this beautiful note about how she loved the brand, or she loved the idea of the brand. She thought it was brilliant. She couldn't wait to see me on the cover of Forbes one day. She was so proud of me. And that was really the next day I registered the company and registered the trademark and didn't look back. So I think sometimes a word of encouragement or just a little nudge can be like, the thing that just is like, right, it's time.
Sometimes it comes from outside, right? You have this passion within you, it's igniting, but sometimes you need some encouragement as well, because then it just gives that a little extra, wow, what am I doing? I should, that's really, I like to hear that story, because I think also shows the value. We spoke about family and also the friendship. It's so important, isn't it, to have a good group of friends and people around you that are cheering for you.
Exactly. I think it's so important.
So one thing that I really want to talk about is Nubian Skin's motto, the ethos of the brand, which I love, which is empowering women and embracing our color. It's so inspirational. It's really fantastic. And I think it translates so well what Nubian Skin is all about. So this idea, this concept, is this something that you have envisioned for your business right from the start? Or is this something that you have developed over time as you were creating the brand, as you were planning and thinking about your business?
Yeah, I mean, that's been our motto, that's been our tagline from the beginning. I think on our very first website, that was sort of our tagline, because that is the essence of the brand. That is the point of the brand, is that women should, one, I just always think women should be empowered, obviously, but also the idea of embracing, your color, embracing who you are. And Kate, like our bodies and our skin are so, they're like, they are us, right? Like it's so part of us, and it's just something to just love and embrace and be proud of, because why not, right?
And we can feel that, we can see that on your campaigns, the messaging, the products even. I think there has always been this sense of inclusivity, body positivity, which is also amazing. And I think, Nubian Skin is beloved and respected because, not only because of that, but I think there's also this feeling and sense of that it's authentic. And do you think that this is something that, is informing us as consumers, because we see more and more people talking about this, and also companies thinking about this and responding to this demand? I mean, of course, we can't generalize, it's impossible to generalize, but do you see this movement growing as we go forward? Do you think that consumers are looking for companies that are not just using buzzwords for marketing purposes, but are creating a company with a strong sense of, a strong ethos and a sense of purpose, and most importantly, authentic?
I mean, I think that for me it's important. I know for a lot of our customers it's really important. We actually just did a survey, and that was something that pretty much, I'd say, like 98% of the customers said. I don't think everybody feels that way. Obviously, that's the whole point of, diverse thought. I think for some people maybe it doesn't matter, but I think for my audience, they can a lot, and you know what? Professional marketers are amazing at their job. And so when people come up with a campaign and they use buzzwords, it tends to be effective because they have a lot of money behind it and they've done a lot of research. But I do think when something is truly authentic, and when you engage with your demographic and your customer at that, or your community at that level, they know, especially when it's somebody who's maybe been through the experience they've been through. That's when authenticity really matters, because that's where the connection is, right? I do think that, I don't think it's a blanket thing. I don't think you can say that, like all millennials or all Gen Z care about authenticity. But I do think that when you find your community, they're your community for a reason, and they're a community because something that you are doing or saying is speaking to them.
Yeah, and also from the perspective, I think, of someone who's creating a business. If you're creating something you're passionate about and love about it, truly, I think it helps you, right, to engage with that business that you're starting, because it's so difficult to start something from scratch.
Exactly, but also I'll never forget when I was in DC and I was doing a pop-up, and when it comes to that motto of empowering women and embracing our color, and people were trickling in and I was helping with fittings, and it was just one of the most beautiful moments as an entrepreneur, because you have all these people come in, and one of the first things, whenever I'd walk into the room, women would automatically just start like apologizing about their bodies, and I was like, can we not do that, please? But then, I remember speaking to a woman we'd done a campaign where we'd used a model who had scarification, and I just thought she was beautiful, and so that's why we used her, because I just thought she was stunning. And I'm, helping this woman, and she said, when you did that campaign with the model with the scars, she was like, it just made me so happy. And she said, I felt so seen, because she's like, and then she's like showing me, she's like, I have all these scars. And I was like, oh my goodness. When I was doing it, I was doing it because I just really liked the model, and I thought she was beautiful, and I thought her scarification was art, essentially, not realizing that was speaking to somebody from a completely different perspective in a way that made them feel seen and validated. And that moment is literally just one of the most beautiful ever, ever, ever. And seeing women come in and you can see they're already, because bra fitting can be quite an intimate thing. And so, you have women, obviously they come in a little bit like apprehensive at first, but then as they sort of get comfortable and they're like, seeing, they're like, oh my goodness, it matches my skin. And then you just sort of see their bodies relax and they're like, they're just, that is to me the most wonderful thing, and no amount of marketing can create that, if you see what I mean.
And it's great because we can see that this is also part of, like we have been speaking about, it's part of the whole concept as well. And we can see that in your beautiful campaigns. You have produced amazing campaigns. Most recently you did one with TFL, which is really beautiful. But since the first one, right? So let's talk about this, the creative side of things, because I know you like to get involved with the creative side of things, and you like to be together with the creative team. So tell us about that, this process of creating amazing, gorgeous campaigns that, really translate your brand and translate Nubian Skin.
I think all bar 2 of our photo shoots I've done and creative direct and styled. But I will say that I work and have had the opportunity to work with some amazingly talented photographers who, they love the brand, they love the ethos of the brand, and so they capture it. And also our models are phenomenal. Whenever I do a shoot, whenever we do a Nubian Skin shoot, a lot of times we end up using a lot of the same models, or you'll see models like, that we've used time and time again, because it's just so positive. I always say, if somebody wants to feel good about themselves, they should just come to a Nubian Skin photo shoot, because one, and it probably is in the way that we cast, but everybody's so supportive of each other. Everybody's so like, oh my goodness. I remember when we did one of the shoots, I was 8.5 weeks pregnant, and they convinced me to they were like, have you done any pregnancy photos? And I was like, no, absolutely not. And they were like, put on some of this stuff. They were like, you need to go. And I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. But anyway, so the photographer did a few photos, but I then got to experience what it was like being on, the end of the camera. Which is, and you've got you've got the photographer, but then you've got all the other models in the background being like, oh my goodness, you look great. And so it always just becomes just it's just positive. Oh my goodness. I really wish, honestly, I'm like, come to a Nubian Skin photo shoot. You'll leave just feeling amazing. So I think it's a combination of, obviously, the ethos of the brand. It's a combination of the team that's behind the shoot. My team who always come to the shoots, the photographers, the models, everybody just gels and everybody buys into the idea. I think everybody likes it because they can feel comfortable. And, a lot of times people feel like they need to fit a mold to be a model. But whenever we have models, we're like, you're here because you're you. That is why. That's why, literally. And so I think that's really empowering.
Yeah, it's a two-way relationship, isn't it? I mean, they trust you, you trust them, and it's so incredible because you can feel that. I can feel that really honestly. When I see the pictures, when I see the videos, I can feel that they are happy to be doing that. It's not just, I'm here, it's another photo shoot in my, busy career. It's something that you feel that they believe in the brand. And it's fantastic that you managed to create that from the first photo shoot. So it's not something that you built over time. It's something that since the first time you got it right.
Thank you.
Personally, I feel more comfortable in my skin knowing that I'm wearing something that belongs to me.
I feel gorgeous in my Nubian Skin.
I feel like a diva in my Nubian Skin.
I feel sexy,
Stunning.
super comfortable and included.
Myself.
Elegant.
I feel loved in my Nubian Skin.
And of course, with this fantastic business, this fantastic idea, as we mentioned, you launched the business in 2014, and then you had to, source all the products and create all these beautiful collections. But and soon afterwards, it seems like recognition came really quickly for you, because in 2015 you won these amazing prizes, Fashion Entrepreneur of the Year awards, Great British Entrepreneur Awards, Hosiery Brand of the Year in the UK, Favorite British Designer. There are several awards building up, and of course in 2016 then something really fascinating happened. Beyonce. You just say her name and everybody is in awe. So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, we got, a lot of recognition very early, and it was crazy because I was like, I'm still figuring things out. I'm not established. I don't have things figured out. But Beyonce, that was insane. And sometimes I need to take a step back and look back and be like, oh my goodness, that happened. That's weird. But we just got an email. We got an email saying, oh, I'm so-and-so. I'm Beyonce's stylist. We want to work together for the Formation Tour. And I remember being like, that's a scam. That's a scam. Don't respond. That's a scam. Somebody's trying to get free underwear. And so I was just like, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And then I forwarded the email to a couple of friends who work in the industry, because I was like, this is weird. And they were like, we know him, respond immediately. And so then I got nervous because I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't respond immediately, and this is like a legit thing. And so, I sent him an email back, and he was like, oh my goodness, yeah, this is great. Obviously we want stuff for our dancers. We want stuff for Beyonce. This is her size. They placed a purchase order, and then nothing. And we fulfilled the order. We sent it out, and then we're like, okay. And then obviously the Formation Tour, especially for the Black community, it was a moment, right? It was like a cultural moment, a celebration of Blackness. And so then we started seeing the images come in, and we were like, oh my goodness, that's like, now we understood why they wanted Nubian Skin, but I was also like, I can see my bra on her. And so I email him, and I'm like, is this what I think it is? And he just sends an email back me 100%. And I was like, I can't believe this. This is mad. So yeah, that was how that happened. And it was amazing. And I remember later on in the tour, one of her, the wardrobe, managers got in touch because they needed more product, and I met her, and she was lovely. She actually got us tickets because we couldn't even get tickets; they were sold out. So she got my husband and I tickets, and so it was It's so weird to think about that happened. I mean, we'd only been in business about 2 years, but yep, there you go.
Wow, I can imagine the emotion, everything. Wow, so things were growing and growing exponentially, right? And talking about another pinch me, am I, awake a moment, you also received a letter in 2017 from Her Majesty's Services. Tell us about that. That's another pivotal moment, isn't it?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So that was, I'm always so embarrassed when I tell this story, but basically I hadn't done my tax return, and so my sister, I had gone away on holiday again, and my sister said, there's a letter here. She's like, you may have done something really bad or good. And I was like, what is she talking about? She's like, there's a letter here from Her Majesty's Services or something to that effect. And I said, oh, it's probably the fine because I was late doing my annual return. So can you just tell me how much I owe, so I can make the payment? And she sends a series of texts, which is OMG, 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 OMG. And I was like, oh, rubbish. I was like, I really feel like the fine's only I don't think it's that much money. I don't think it's that bad. And then she just sends me a picture of, this letter which says, you have been nominated to receive an MBE for services to fashion. And I just burst into tears because I was like, I feel like every single moment I feel like is a hard time in the journey, but that's felt like a very hard time in the journey. And so getting that letter and seeing services to fashion, I was just like, what can you say to that? And it was completely unexpected. And to this day, even though I asked them multiple times, nobody will tell me. I was like, who nominated me, please? Because I would really like to say thank you. I, to this day, have no idea. So if that person is listening, thank you. I have no idea how I got nominated, who nominated me, but it will be something that I didn't even know that was possible, to be honest. I didn't know that that was possible for like a normal person to get something like that. So yeah, incredibly grateful, because just even that, services to fashion, is just, that's such an honor.
And I guess, for your family as well, I guess it was a really special moment probably for them. Did they come to know?
Absolutely. I mean, I will, at least I'm like, you know what, no matter what I do, my parents will always know that I took them to Buckingham Palace. Like, I did that. And so you were allowed 3 people. And so my husband came with me, obviously, but my parents came, and I always look back at the pictures from that because it was just so beautiful, because they were wearing their like full-on Yoruba, like formal dress. My dad's in his agbada, my mom's in her Irombaba, and they just looked wonderful. And it was amazing. It was like we got an Uber and we went into Buckingham Palace, and it was just great. It was wonderful. And so it was amazing to be able to share that honor with them, because to be honest, without them, none of it would exist. I mean, I wouldn't exist, but none of it would exist, because they've been phenomenal supports. And so, yeah,
you deserve a big celebration. We all together.
Exactly.
And it's great, because also I think as of course, all stories have all these ups and downs. These are fantastic moments that you got to share with your family and with everybody who's working, supporting you. But in all careers, and when we are building a business as well, there are always obstacles and challenges that we have to overcome, always, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us about the hurdles and the obstacles that you had to overcome, the learning curve since the beginning. What do you remember most, some of the biggest, hurdles and challenges?
I mean, how long do you have? But yeah, I think that is one of the things to always remember, is that for every high, there's everything has an equal and opposite reaction. For every high, there is a spectacular low, and it is a constant like this. Like, I wish the journey's like this, but really it's just like a yo-yo that goes up and down. And so my mum actually said something the other day, just a couple of days ago, when I was speaking to her, and she said, life will always have struggle. She was like, always. That is always going to happen. So she was like, that's what makes life interesting. Without it, we would be incredibly bored. And that was I needed to hear that, because sometimes, because there's always struggle. And so, at the beginning, when I was trying, at the very, very beginning, when I was trying to start off, before I even had anything, I was trying to reach out to manufacturers, and nobody got back to me. And I'm thinking like, I have this amazing idea. I promise it's amazing, but nobody cared. And then it's an amazing things like, oh my goodness, you get stocked at ASOS, you get stocked at Nordstrom, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, you're winning awards. And then you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't quite figure out margins, and this is actually maybe not ideal, and so then it's like this amazing high, and then you're like, oh goodness, the reality hits, and you're like, oh, there's this low. Or you're like, you go viral on Instagram, where you've got like, now I've got like 100-something thousand followers, and then you're like, the algorithm's changed. Oh my goodness, they just got from Facebook. Now they're monetizing. All of a sudden, we can't engage with our community the way we did. And so it really is, there's always a challenge. And it's like, okay, we have this beautiful product and people love it. But then you're like, to create this beautiful product, we need to dye all these components, which means all of a sudden, if we were doing it in black, we could just ask for 50 meters. Now they're telling us we need to order 1,000 meters minimum. And so you're like, I want to do all these amazing things. But you're like, actually, I need to use that money and invest it into inventory and components, because I can't buy them like everybody else can, because I'm not doing just beige, black and white. And so it's that constant tension of, oh my goodness, this is amazing. But then being like, I'm dealing with the reality of something that is quite frankly very boring, but also very difficult. You know, and so and on it goes. You know, one day you can be at Buckingham Palace and the next day you're like, that's a big bill from VAT. How am I going to pay that? So it's just, and I think that's every entrepreneur story. You know, and as you say, sometimes actually you do just need, you know, it's that email from a customer saying thank you, or it's, you know, having a moment like in a fitting room where you're like, somebody's life has been touched by this. And then that really gives you like the boost you need to go on because, yeah, the shiny moments are amazing and, you know, amazing, but there are also the moments that aren't so shiny. And then there are the everyday moments where you just have to get on and do things that sometimes are a bit boring. And yeah, so it is, there are always challenges, but so far they've all been worth it.
Do you feel a sense of responsibility as well as you were growing, not only to yourself, but to your customers, to this mission that you had as well, which is bigger than the brand itself? Did you feel that at some point you were thinking, or not, or you just took it, didn't think much about that side of things?
No, I mean, I think there's always, when you create something, and especially when you really put your line in the sand about saying, this is who I am serving and this is who I want to represent, that does come with a lot of responsibility, and it means that you have to respect the people who support you. And so, you know, I do take it as, yeah, that is something that I definitely consider. And as with any entrepreneur, there have been times where you're like, can I really be bothered to do this anymore? I mean, that is every single entrepreneur has thought that. And then that's when you're like, okay, well, why am I doing this? And if I were to say, okay, actually, you know what, I'm just closing up shop tomorrow, you know, thinking, well, has the market changed enough? Is there still a need for what we're doing? And really thinking about that and saying, okay, actually, I do want to keep going.
And you gave up a very comfortable life in terms of career. You were working in finance. Yeah. It's a good industry to work.
I joke with my husband. I'm like, ooh, you know, I was like, I think we'd probably be a lot better off if I just stayed in finance. A lot less stressed out, and I'd probably be making a lot more money. But you know, you sort of it's and that's been a conversation that I've had, and one of the things that I have that I'm so proud of actually is fine that yes, probably if I had stayed in my job, I probably would be making a lot more money and could be taking it a lot easier. However, I built my legacy, and that is something. I remember I was writing about that in my journal the other day, and I was like, no matter what happens, my legacy is ensured. Like, I changed an industry, and that is a phenomenal thing. Like, you know, wow. When I had that realization, I just thought, that's incredible. A legacy. I mean, that's worth more than, you know, a legacy lives forever, right? Money doesn't. And that is, yeah, that's a really powerful thing.
Wow, I get goosebumps hearing you. Because I think you are, like I said already, and I'm going to repeat it, I think you are amazing. I really I felt so inspired when I first heard you speak, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I love the story about the husbands as well. Sometimes they are unspoken heroes because they have to put up with things that we do.
Oh my goodness, my husband is an angel. Really.
Yes, it's interesting. But, you know, and also I think one interesting thing that you mentioned about your mission and the legacy, and you have every reason to be proud of that. And I can imagine as well, as a woman of color, you probably had even more obstacles on your way, educating people and trying to tell us about that as well. That difficulty that you probably had when you had to explain certain things, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one. Obviously, our customer gets it, right? Because
you don't have to explain anything.
But it has been a really interesting thing when we used to do trade shows. We haven't done trade shows in a while since COVID, but when we used to do trade shows, it would be really interesting when you'd have some buyers come along and they'd be like, "Ooh, well, that's really niche," and you're like, "Well, I mean, people's skin color exists, so there's a lot of non-white people in the world, Or when people would say, "Oh, but do you?" They'd be like, "We just don't think that we have room for that." And that was a really, really frustrating thing to hear, because walk into any department store, lingerie department, and they will have maybe 50 to 100 brands. And every single one of those brands, every single one of them will have nude. Every single one. And they will all be beige. So I was like, how can you be willing to buy the same color from 100 brands and not invest in one brand to have a few different nudes? That was just something that I just couldn't comprehend. And that was something that I found to be incredibly insulting, but also incredibly frustrating. That people just didn't want to be part of the solution. So that has probably been the biggest frustration when it came to educating people. There were some buyers that got it immediately, they got it immediately. Or some buyers who would say, "This is amazing. Where I live is completely undiverse." Fine, that I understand. But they were like, "But I love your product." But the people who, literally have shops on, Oxford Street or in, the main shopping streets of Paris, and you're thinking, you can't have one brand that has a slightly different nude, really? So that has been probably the most frustrating thing, I think, as somebody who's like, I exist, I deserve to be catered to, I shop in your shop, I think that's been frustrating. It's just people's willful ignorance.
Willful ignorance, that's it, isn't it? I mean, people have to educate themselves. And it must have been frustrating and upsetting, because you are there having to explain things that shouldn't have to be explained in the first place. And, it's shocking, but unfortunately it's to reality, isn't it? It is reality, and it needs to change. It needs to change. But there's something else also that I wanted to ask you about, Ade, which is, we all go through a journey of self-discovery when we are starting a business. We learn a lot about ourselves. And there's a lot of research on that, particularly female founders, on imposter syndrome. Oh. Have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome?
I mean, I feel that every single day. Every single day.
You don't have any reason to feel like this, Ade.
I feel that every single day. And, you mentioned earlier that, I got a lot of recognition very early. And that, to me, I've always been somebody who's, prior to becoming an entrepreneur, if I said, I want to do X, then I worked hard and I did X and it worked out. And I was like, fantastic. And then I'd be like, I want to do this. And I did it, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is great. And even with starting Nubian Skin, it happened that very linear fashion. And so then to come into something where it was like this, and for my personality, which is just sort of like achieve, do well, achieve more, do well, achieve more, do well, to enter a sphere in which I didn't have any knowledge, made countless mistakes, continued to make countless mistakes, and also success for me was, and is a little bit less so now, but was defined in a very specific way. And so to have success, which most people would kill for, but not be the success that I thought it should be, was a very strange place to be in. So, people are like, oh my goodness, I can't believe, Beyonce, or they're like, oh my goodness, you got an MBE. And I'm thinking, why am I not a millionaire? Like, why am I not making like 10 million a year? Why am I not making 20? And I'm like, so that was a very weird place to be in, because in my head I was like, this is what success is. And to the point I made about then thinking about legacy and what you're building, because my father would always say, he was like, do what you stand for, build your legacy first, everything else comes after that. And I never understood that till recently, because my bar, especially having worked in finance, I mean, you know, like that's what you benchmark yourself against. And so then to be like, okay, take a step back. All this imposter syndrome is insane. I'm like, look at your receipts. And I remember speaking to a coach, and she was like, okay, you're saying these things, but she was like, can you just go through your accomplishments? And I started listing them, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. And so, yeah, there is 100% imposter syndrome, because sometimes you think, you know, you can't help but think, I should be at the star. I should be at the moon, and I'm only at the stars. Why?
Because you push yourself very hard. You are a hyperachiever, and I can relate to that, perfectionist.
Exactly. And it's something that I'm working on, and also learning to appreciate what I have done, because it's something I tend to not appreciate it.
But I can totally, and I think it's so great you're being open about all those things, because in this day and age with, you know, social media, and it has changed a lot. Like you said, in the beginning, social media was a really pleasant experience. It can still be. By the way, if you follow Ade and you're watching this, and if you follow Nubian Skin, it will be a very pleasant experience, I guarantee you. But, you know, if you follow certain people, not so much. And it's very... but, you know, especially young girls who are growing up, and, you know, people are still at uni thinking what they should do. It's a lot of pressure, because it's by comparison, right? And we are always measuring up and thinking, oh my God, this person has an amazing life. So I think it's so great to have someone like you, who is so inspirational, to come here and say all those things. Be very honest about it, because people can, you know what, you know, if she can do it, you know, maybe I can do it as well. I think that's the idea of the 1 million voices. I want people to try,
Absolutely.
Not be afraid to try.
And it is, you know, it's, yeah, not all that glitters is gold. And yeah, I think it's really important, and I say it's really important because it's something that I'm learning, is to define success on your own terms, as opposed to what the world defines success as.
So Ade, a big part of the 1 Billion Voices project is that I always invite our guests to share their professional advice, their top tips. The idea is to help people who are just starting out, and perhaps even considering also changing career paths. So Ade, what would be your advice, your top tips for someone who's just starting out, who's starting a business, and who wants to become an entrepreneur?
So I'm going to say something which my father always says, actually. And he says, you can never go wrong with humility. And humility does not mean, because I think I used to take it a different way, but humility doesn't mean like shying away from saying, I've done a great job. Humility doesn't mean that. Humility is understanding that maybe you don't know everything, and maybe you need help. Because one of the things, and this is a problem or a mistake that I've made, is thinking, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I can figure it out. I know I can figure it out. If I just study enough, I can figure it out, which is a great mentality to have. However, you can learn from other people, and you can ask for help, and you know what? They probably have experience in which they can impart with you, or you can learn, which will make your life so much easier. And so having humility to say, I need help, or I can learn more from maybe somebody that has more experience, is incredibly, I think it's very, very good to be humble. Yeah, I would say that. It's a very good thing to be humble. That being said, I also think it is another tip alongside that is to be proud and take ownership of your accomplishments. Because everybody has had accomplishments, like no matter what. If you're young and you're starting a business, maybe you've you finished school and you did well, or maybe you didn't do well in school, but you decided that actually I might not have done well in school, but I really have a dream and I'm going to go for it. Be proud of that, because it is so important, while being humble, to also really, really work on your self-worth and understanding how important that is, and understanding that you are deserving regardless. There's nothing that you need to do or achieve to be deserving. You're just deserving because you exist. And so that's not the same as being entitled. But, you know, I think, I would say really, you know, take ownership of your accomplishments, you know, build your self-worth, but also make sure to humility. You can never go wrong with humility because everybody needs help and everybody can learn from somebody else. That's
fantastic. And build a team of people around you that can help. That's important, isn't it? I mean, like you mentioned the photographers, you mentioned the models, you mentioned all the support network that you have.
And try and find a community that, you know, that shares your values, you know, and uplifts you as well. Because sometimes when I've been going through a hard time and then we do a shoot, you know, and one of the photographers that I work with a lot will be like, oh, you know, but like, you're doing so well, or, you know, they just have like a kind word, or they're like, we love the products we do with Nubian Skin. And it's that, you know, just sometimes surround yourself with people that will lift you up, because it goes a long way.
Still on the topic of obstacles and challenges, many times we have to improvise because things simply don't go according to plan. You already mentioned how difficult it was for you to find manufacturers. But let's go to the point in time when you found your manufacturer, you were starting your company, but then you had to improvise and be very creative when you were looking for materials and, you know, to produce your samples, your first line of product. So tell us about that particular experience.
I mean, the colors, I mean, that was insane. That took about 1.5 years to perfect because no fabric manufacturers had the colors. So they just didn't have them. And so I started visiting makeup counters, and I went with a little Pantone book, and I was speaking to the makeup counters about which were the most popular colors, and I sort of came up with a spectrum that I liked, and I tried to match them to Pantones, sent them off to the factory, the Pantones didn't work. And so then I was like, right, I'm going to have to like come up with these colors. And so it was giving feedback on the colors. Actually, it needs a bit more yellow. It needs to be richer. It needs a bit more red. And just doing that back and forth, getting swatches until I was like, ha, this is the color. This is the color we want. And then when it came to the hosiery, because that's a sheer fabric as opposed to a solid fabric, that ended up with me. We got 2 of the colors right and 2 of the colors still needed work. And so I literally was boiling tea and coffee on I have a picture. It's like literally boiling tea and coffee on my kitchen and stove and like dyeing them, taking them out, trying them on myself, trying them on friends, being like, is this color? And then being like, these are the colors. These are the colors that you need to reproduce. So now that I look back at that, I was like, goodness, I had a lot of energy. But yeah, that was, oh gosh, yeah.
You didn't give up. That is fantastic. You know, they need to learn. Let me show you how it's done. Even if you have to use your own kitchen.
But honestly, we got there in the end and the colors are beautiful.
So Ade, now we're going to talk about we have a segment here that really I love, which is called Making a Difference. And I always invite our guests to nominate, especially after, you know, COVID and everything that is going on. So many charities have been struggling, and I always invite them to nominate an organization that is making a difference to people's lives. And tell us about the organization that you have chosen for us here today, and what do they do?
Yeah, of course. So the organization that I've picked is called the Trussell Trust. So that's Trussell Trust. And they basically help you find your local food bank. So obviously with COVID, I feel very, very privileged that I didn't struggle. You know, I didn't lose my job. My husband didn't lose his job. We never were worried about where are we going to, you know, our biggest worry during the pandemic was, can we get an Ocado delivery, right? But there are so many people who are incredibly hardworking or some who can't work, who just aren't making enough money to make ends meet. And there's so many children who are living below the poverty line that it's disgraceful, quite frankly. And so donating to your local food bank is so important. And so if you go to the Trussell Trust.org, or you can just put into Google Trussell Trust, you'll be able to find your local food bank that you can donate to. Because unfortunately, I think as we sort of see COVID ending, there are a lot of things, inflation's already increasing, and things are getting increasingly expensive, and they're only going to get more so. And there's so many people who are struggling to make ends meet anyway, and who will need help. And so by donating to your local food bank, that can help them even in a little way.
I was made to feel welcome.
I was made to feel that I matter, that my choices matter.
It was straightforward. The people were kind.
The food was nutritious.
The food was needed. I proceeded to go a few more times.
To get a few more things to eat.
To stop my child feeling hungry as they go to sleep.
Soon my benefits were sorted and I was back on my feet.
I did not need to go anymore.
There is no shame.
There should be no stigma.
There should be no hunger.
There's too many people carrying weight on their backs.
There's too many people falling through the cracks.
In a rich country with a system that is breaking.
It is not my fault, and it is not of my making.
We need people to stand up and say,
it doesn't need to be this way.
Reach out if you can help.
Reach out if you need a hand.
It could happen to anyone.
It could happen to anyone.
It could happen to you.
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 Thank you so much, Ade, for sharing the information about the Trussell Trust. They are an incredible organization, and we invite everybody to go to their website and also to follow them on social media. We're going to include all the details here. We're going to share all the links, and we also invite you, of course, if you can, to help and make a donation. The Trussell Trust is helping a lot of people through difficult times, and you can help them make an even greater difference. And I also wanted to thank you, Ade, for everything, for speaking with us here today and for sharing your incredible story with us. You are an inspiration. It's been a real treat, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Yes.
But it's been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
If you enjoyed watching this interview, don't forget to like, share and leave your comment. I also invite you to subscribe to the channel. Just click on the button below. And to also follow us on social media. We are sharing all the links in the video's description. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.